I didn't leave America because I was running away from something. I left because I was disappearing inside it. After 38 years working construction in Ohio, framing houses, pouring concrete, showing up before dawn in January when the ground was frozen solid, I retired at 64 with what the paperwork called adequate income, Social Security plus a small pension from the union. Together, just under $1,900 a month. When I signed the retirement forms, the woman across the desk smiled and said, "You should be comfortable." I nodded. I believed her. That was 3 years ago. By the second year, comfortable wasn't the word I'd use. My property taxes in Columbus had jumped again. Homeowners insurance went up after the storms. My truck needed work I kept putting off. I started doing the math every Sunday night, the kind of math that keeps you up until 2 in the morning, going over the same numbers, hoping they'll somehow add up differently. They never did. I wasn't broke. I want to be clear about that. I paid my bills. But there was nothing left after. No dinner out. No visit to my daughter Elena in Portland. No margin for anything unexpected. I was 64 years old with 38 years of hard work behind me. And I was eating sandwiches for dinner 4 nights a week because it was cheaper than cooking a real meal. I remember one afternoon in February, gray sky, the heater running, a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I sat at my kitchen table and thought, is this it? Is this what I worked for? I didn't have an answer. But I started looking for one. A buddy of mine named Ray, we'd worked the same crew for 12 years, had moved to Vietnam 2 years earlier. He'd been sending me messages here and there. Photos of food I couldn't name, streets full of motorbikes, him sitting outside somewhere with a beer, squinting into the sun. I thought he was out of his mind, honestly. Vietnam. Who retires to Vietnam? But then, one night, deep into one of those Sunday math sessions, I called him, just to talk. He picked up on the second ring even though it was morning his time, and for an hour he talked and I listened. Rent $250 a month. Full meals for $2. Warm every single day. Friendly people everywhere. His total monthly expenses, including everything, came to about $1,100. He was saving money for the first time in his adult life. He was sleeping 8 hours a night. He'd lost 15 pounds without trying, just from walking everywhere and eating real food. I didn't book a ticket that night, but something shifted. I spent the next 3 months watching every video I could find, reading forums, joining Facebook groups for American expats in Southeast Asia. Vietnam kept coming up, specifically a coastal city called Da Nang. Manageable size, strong expat community, English more common than I expected, beaches, mountains, a slower pace that people described not as laziness but as sanity. I looked at my bank account. I looked at the heater that was running up my gas bill. I looked at the sandwich I was eating for dinner. At 64 years old, I sold most of what I owned, kept some things in a storage unit, bought a one-way ticket, called Elena to tell her. She went quiet for a long moment and then said, "Dad, are you sure about this?" I told her I wasn't sure about anything, but I was going. And here's what I can tell you now, almost 18 months in. Moving here didn't just save my finances. It rewired me, not always comfortably, not always in ways I expected. There were moments in the first few months where I sat alone in my apartment and seriously wondered what I had done to myself, but I kept going. And what I found on the other side of that discomfort is a version of my life I didn't think existed anymore. These are the things that changed me, the real ones, the ones nobody explains until you're already here. The first thing that hit me was the heat. Not a surprise, you'd think. I knew Vietnam was tropical. But knowing and feeling are entirely different things. I stepped off the plane in Da Nang in late April, and it was like opening an oven. 90 degrees, thick with humidity, and I was standing there in the jeans and flannel I'd worn on the plane because Ohio in April is still cold. A man passing me in the arrivals hall glanced at my outfit and looked genuinely concerned. I peeled off the flannel in the taxi and sat there sweating into the seat, thinking, I have made a terrible mistake. I hadn't. But it took my body about 6 weeks to accept that. Back in Columbus, I spent about 5 months of the year dreading winter, scraping ice off the truck, wearing 4 layers to walk to the mailbox, paying heating bills that made me flinch every time I opened the envelope. Here, there is no winter. There's hot, and there's slightly less hot. At first, that felt oppressive. Now, on mornings when I sit outside with my coffee and the air is already warm at 7 a.m., and the sky is doing something incredible over the Han River, I think about February in Ohio, and I feel something close to pity for my former self. The cold was a kind of slow punishment I had accepted so completely that I forgot it was optional. The second thing was the food, and I'm going to spend some time on this because it deserves it. I had never been what you'd call an adventurous eater. 38 years in construction, you eat what's fast and cheap. Sandwiches, drive-thrus, whatever the gas station had that wouldn't kill you immediately. Elena used to tease me about it. "Dad, you eat like a 17-year-old who just discovered Wendy's." She wasn't wrong. Here, food is different in a way that goes beyond the flavors. It's everywhere, it's cheap, and it's made by people who actually care about it. My first week, Ray took me to a place near the river. Plastic stools, no menu in English, a woman who had been making one dish for 30 years. A bowl of Hugh beef noodle soup. I didn't know what I was eating until I was halfway through it. Spicy, rich, lemongrass. Something I couldn't identify that I've since learned was shrimp paste. I sat on that little plastic stool on the sidewalk, and I ate the whole bowl, and then I ordered another one. It cost the equivalent of about $1.80. I've had that dish dozens of times since. I've had pho at 6 in the morning standing at a cart on my street. I've eaten banh mi out of a woman's converted bicycle for 60 cents. I've had fresh seafood at a beachside restaurant where the total bill for 2 people, with beer, came to $11. In Columbus, $11 barely got me a sandwich and a coffee. Here it's a meal I'll think about for a week. I won't pretend every meal has been good. I've had a few that disagreed with me in ways I'd rather not describe. My stomach took about 2 months to fully adjust. But the adjustment was worth it. I've lost 20 pounds since moving here, and I haven't once thought about losing weight. It just happened. Real food, walking everywhere, no more drive-through out of exhaustion at 9 p.m. The third thing, and this one took me longest to work through, was the pace of life. I'm going to be honest with you. It nearly broke me before it healed me. In Ohio, time was something you managed. Tightly. You were early, or you were late, and late meant something. It meant disrespect, it meant incompetence, it meant you didn't take things seriously. 38 years in construction, you learn that fast. The crew shows up at 6. The concrete gets poured on schedule. The inspector comes at a specific time and you better be ready. That wiring goes deep. After enough years, it stops being a work thing and becomes a personality thing. You walk fast. You eat fast. You answer emails the same day. You feel vaguely guilty if you sit still too long. I came here with all of that intact. My first month, I hired a guy, I'll call him Min, because that's his name, to help me handle some paperwork for my rental situation. He told me he'd come by Tuesday afternoon. I sat in my apartment from 1 o'clock onward, shoes on, phone charged, ready. 2 o'clock came. 3 o'clock. 3:30. I texted Ray, "Is this normal?" He texted back a single laughing emoji. Min showed up at 4:45, completely relaxed, apologized once lightly, and then sat down and was extraordinarily helpful for the next 2 hours and solved everything I needed solved. I was annoyed for days after that. But here's what I noticed over the following weeks. Min wasn't careless. He wasn't irresponsible. He was managing about 7 different things at once, helping multiple people, and he got to me when he could. What I had interpreted as disrespect was actually just a different relationship with time. One that prioritizes the task over the clock, the person over the schedule. The work got done. The work was good, and he'd done it while apparently also being completely calm the entire time, which was more than I could say for myself. I started watching people here, really watching them. The way they sit, the way conversations happen, long, unhurried, people actually listening to each other instead of waiting for their turn to talk. The way a meal isn't something you finish, it's something you sit with. The way a Sunday isn't a thing to optimize. Somewhere around month 4, I realized I had stopped wearing my watch. I didn't take it off on purpose. I just forgot to put it on one morning, and then the next morning, and then I noticed it was still on the nightstand, and I felt no particular need to change that. In 38 years of working, I don't think I had ever gone an entire day without checking the time. Now I go weeks. I still get things done. My bills are paid. My visa is current. But I do them at a pace that doesn't feel like I'm running from something. For the first time in my adult life, time feels like something I have rather than something that's running out. The fourth thing was learning to live with uncertainty in a way that would have been impossible for me before. In America, I needed to know. Every plan had a backup plan. Every problem had a hotline, a warranty, a customer service number with a guaranteed response time. When something broke, there was a system. When I needed information, there was a website, a form, a clear answer. I built my whole professional life on the assumption that chaos was the enemy and systems were how you beat it. Here, systems exist. They're just different. My first time at a government office in Da Nang, some paperwork related to my visa. I walked in expecting the American version of bureaucracy. Slow, yes. Frustrating, yes, but logical, with a clear line and a clear process and a clear endpoint. What I found instead was something that looked, to my Ohio-trained eyes, like beautiful chaos. Papers stacked in ways that seemed random. People appearing to go to multiple windows for no clear reason. A ceiling fan that moved the warm air around without doing much about the temperature. A woman who seemed to be doing 3 jobs simultaneously while eating a small container of something that smelled incredible. I stood there for a full minute trying to figure out where the line was. An older man next to me, seeing the look on my face, gestured me toward a plastic chair and said something in Vietnamese, and then, reading my blank expression, switched to surprisingly good English. "Sit, it will be your turn." I sat. He was right, it was my turn, everything got handled. It took longer than I would have liked, and it involved more trips to different windows than I thought were necessary. But I walked out with what I needed. On the walk home, something unexpected happened. I realized I wasn't actually upset. I'd been prepared to be upset, had already rehearsed the frustration on the way there. But in those 2 hours in that office, I'd had a conversation with the older man, whose name was Fong, who had lived in Da Nang his whole life and had opinions about everything from local seafood to American foreign policy, all delivered with a kind of cheerful directness I found completely disarming. I'd watched a young woman help an elderly couple with their paperwork without being asked to, just because they needed help. I'd eaten a piece of fruit from a bag someone offered around the waiting area. I didn't lose 2 hours. I spent 2 hours. I call Elena every Sunday. This has been our arrangement since I moved here, and it's become something I look forward to all week. She's 31, lives in Portland with her partner David, works in marketing, moves at the speed of someone who has too many tabs open at all times. For the first year, these calls often had a particular shape. She'd ask me how things were, I'd tell her. She'd worry a little, I'd reassure her. We'd talk about her life, we'd hang up. Good calls. But a little careful, a little managed. Around month 8, something changed in the calls. I stopped trying to reassure her so much because I stopped needing to. I wasn't performing contentment anymore. I just had it. She noticed. "Dad, you sound different," she said one Sunday. I asked what she meant. She was quiet for a second. "Slower," she said, "like you have time." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "I think I do." She laughed, a real laugh, surprised, and then she said, "Okay, tell me everything." Now our calls go long, sometimes 2 hours. David has started sitting in on them. Last month, Elena said, unprompted, "I think you made the right call, Dad. That is the single best thing anyone has said to me since I got here." The fifth thing, the healthcare reality, because I know this is what people worry about, because I worried about it too, was less frightening than I expected and more complicated than the YouTube videos suggested. Before I left Ohio, I paid $487 a month for health insurance through my union retirement plan. That's just under $6,000 a year. And it still came with copays, deductibles, and the particular joy of calling an insurance company to argue about whether something was covered. I'm a healthy 64-year-old, no major conditions, no medications beyond some blood pressure management, but the idea of losing that coverage terrified me. It was the thing I thought about most before I left, the thing Elena brought up every time. Here's what I found. Da Nang has several hospitals with international wings. I've now been to one of them twice, once for a respiratory thing that turned out to be nothing, once for a skin issue that a dermatologist looked at in about 15 minutes and diagnosed correctly. Total cost for the visit and medication both times, under $60. Not $60 after insurance. $60, full stop. I've since gotten international health insurance, a real policy, covers major incidents, medical evacuation if needed, for about $180 a month. $180 versus $487. I get that this isn't the whole story. A major health event here is still something to think through carefully. I'm not telling you the medical system here is equivalent to a top-tier American hospital, because in some ways it isn't. What I'm telling you is that for routine care and moderate issues, the quality has been good, and the cost has been a fraction of what I paid at home for the privilege of arguing with an insurance adjuster. I keep an emergency fund. I don't blow money because life feels cheaper. I stay smart about it. But the fear that healthcare would be an impossible barrier, that fear was larger than the reality. The sixth thing that rewired me was loneliness, and then the unexpected cure for it. I want to be honest about this because I don't see enough people talk about it. The first 2 months here, I was lonely in a way I hadn't experienced since I was a young man in a new city with no connections and no money. At least then I was young enough that it felt like an adventure. At 64, alone in an apartment in a foreign country where I couldn't read the street signs and didn't know anyone except Ray, who was kind but busy with his own life, it felt different. It felt like I had made an irreversible mistake. Elena would call, and I'd tell her everything was fine, and most of it was fine. But the quiet in my apartment at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night felt enormous. This is the thing about loneliness in America that I hadn't fully understood until I left. I had been lonely there too, I just hadn't noticed. After my wife Margaret passed, that was 7 years ago now, I had my routines, my neighbors I waved to, but didn't really know, my Saturday errands, the television in the evenings. Life was structured enough that the absence of real connection didn't announce itself too loudly. Here, without the structure, the absence was obvious. But here's what happened. Because I was out of the apartment every day, groceries, coffee, walks along the river, just to have somewhere to go, I started becoming part of the neighborhood. Slowly, the way these things actually happen. The woman who runs the cafe on my street learned how I like my coffee without me ever explaining it. The family across the alley started waving when they saw me, then saying hello. Then, once they figured out my Vietnamese was terrible, but that I was trying, inviting me to sit with them sometimes in the evenings when they put chairs out front. A British expat named Graham, who came into the same cafe most mornings, became someone I ate lunch with twice a week. Ray introduced me to some people he knew. One of those people introduced me to others. By month 4, I had a life here in the way that a life actually works. Not all at once, not because I signed up for anything or forced it, but through the accumulation of small repeated encounters that slowly become something real. I laugh more than I have in years. That sounds like a greeting card, and I'm sorry for it, but it's true, and I don't know how else to say it. I laugh at my terrible Vietnamese, and at the gecko that lives on my bathroom wall, and at the motorbike traffic, which is theoretically terrifying, and yet somehow develops its own logic once you watch it long enough. I laugh with Graham over bad coffee when neither of us can figure out what something on a menu says. I laughed, genuinely, For the first time in a long time, when my phone auto-corrected something, I was trying to type in Vietnamese into something deeply inappropriate that I accidentally sent to my landlord. He replied with 3 laughing emojis. We still joke about it. The 7th thing was money. Specifically, what happens to your relationship with money when it stops being a source of constant low-grade dread? My first full month here, I sat down at the end of it and added up what I'd spent. Rent, $240. Food, eating out almost every day because it's so affordable and the food is so good. About $200 for the month. Transportation, mostly the motorbike taxi app, $30. Utilities, international phone plan, incidentals, about $150. Miscellaneous, a day trip, some things for the apartment, a gift I sent Elena, $80. Total, $700. My income that month, $1,860. I sat there staring at that number for a while. I had a surplus. I had not had a surplus in 3 years. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you can move here and stop being careful. Visa fees are real. My visa situation requires renewal and the fees add up, especially if you're working with an agent to handle the paperwork, which I recommend. Healthcare reserve. I keep $3,000 set aside and don't touch it. If you want to travel, and you will want to, because Southeast Asia is extraordinary and everywhere is close and cheap to get to. That costs money. I've had one unexpected expense that wiped out a month's surplus entirely, a dental thing. Dentistry here is actually very good and very affordable, but it still costs money. The cushion matters, the discipline matters, but the starting point is so different that discipline actually becomes possible. In Ohio, I was disciplined and it wasn't enough. Here, being reasonably careful means I'm building savings for the first time since my 50s. That feeling of not being afraid of my bank account took about 6 months to fully trust. I kept waiting for the number to go wrong. It didn't. The 8th thing was learning to read what people mean rather than what they say. And this one required real humility from a man who spent nearly 4 decades being very direct. In construction, directness is currency. You say what you need. You say what's wrong. You tell someone when they've made a mistake. There's no time and no particular value placed on softening things. I'm not saying it's rude. It's just efficient. You know where you stand. Here, I don't always know where I stand. Not right away. Early on, I asked a young woman at a shop near my apartment if they sold a particular kind of adapter I needed for an appliance. She smiled and said they might have something like that. She'd check. She came back after a moment and said she wasn't sure, but maybe I could try the place around the corner. I thanked her and went around the corner. They didn't have it either, but pointed me somewhere else. 3 stops later, I had the adapter. I was mildly frustrated when I got home. Ray, when I told him, said, "She was trying to help you without telling you no." I didn't understand at first. He explained, "People here generally don't like to disappoint directly. Saying we don't have that feels like a failure, a dead end, an unsatisfying conclusion. Saying maybe try around the corner keeps the possibility alive and sends you somewhere that might actually help. It's not deception. It's a different theory of what a helpful interaction looks like." Once I understood that, everything got easier. I stopped hearing maybe as probably and started hearing it as let's explore. I stopped expecting a direct no and started paying attention to the slight hesitation, the redirect, the over-helpful suggestion that pointed me elsewhere. I became a better reader of the room. I became, I think, a slightly more patient person in general. I called my son Kevin around this time. He's 36, lives in Cleveland, skeptical about all of this from the beginning, and he asked me how things were really going. I told him about this communication thing, about learning to read differently. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That actually sounds exhausting." I thought about it. It was at first, I told him. Now it just feels like listening better. He didn't say anything for a second. Then, maybe I should try that. The 9th thing, and this is the one I didn't expect to be a thing at all, was the presence of community in a way I had forgotten existed. I grew up in a neighborhood in Columbus in the 70s where people knew each other, where you borrowed things from next door and returned them, where someone's grandmother watched everyone's kids for an hour when needed, and nobody paid her because it wasn't a transaction. It was just how neighborhoods worked. Somewhere along the way that disappeared, or I moved away from it, or it moved away from me, and I spent the last 20 years of my Ohio life in a subdivision where I knew 2 of my neighbors by name and hadn't spoken to 3 of the others in years, despite living 15 feet from them. Here, my building has 8 units. I know all 8 families by now. Not deeply, we're not having dinner together every night, but I know names, I know rough situations. I know when someone's having a hard week because I can tell from the way they come in off the street. The woman below me, who I'll call Mrs. Lan because that's what everyone calls her, has started leaving small containers of food outside my door when she makes something she thinks I should try. I started leaving coffee for her in return because she mentioned once that she likes the brand I order online. This is not a formal arrangement. There was no conversation about it. It just happened, the way things happen when people are paying attention to each other. This is not something I manufactured. I am not, by nature, a particularly social person. I'm the guy who was eating sandwiches alone in Ohio and was fine with it, mostly. But it turns out fine with it and actually okay with it are not the same thing, and being here has shown me the difference. I feel like part of something. That's the simplest way I can say it. At 64, after decades of being competent and reliable, and showing up on time and doing my job, I feel like part of something. There's a practical thing I want to tell you, because every forum I read before I came here danced around it and nobody just said it plainly. The scam risk is real and specific and manageable if you go in with your eyes open. I didn't come here for a relationship and I haven't pursued one. But I've watched it happen to other expats. The financial entanglement that starts gradually, that feels like connection and is maybe partly genuine connection, but that ends with money moving in one direction until it doesn't anymore. I'm not being cynical about Vietnamese people. I'm being factual about a dynamic that exists anywhere in the world where there's a significant wealth gap and one person is lonely and the other person is struggling. The answer is not suspicion. The answer is going slowly, paying attention to your gut, and maintaining your financial independence in a very practical sense. Don't give anyone access to your accounts. Keep your decisions yours. Build real friendships that aren't transactional before you trust anyone with anything important. Ray told me this on day 1. I'm telling you now. It's not the romantic part of the story, but it's the part that keeps the rest of the story going. The 10th thing, the one I keep coming back to, the one that surprised me most, was not about Vietnam at all. It was about who I had been becoming without realizing it, back in Ohio, in the last years before I left. I have a photo from my birthday 2 years before I moved. My daughter Elena had come to visit. We're sitting at my kitchen table. She's smiling. Elena is always smiling. She's that kind of person. I'm smiling too. But when I look at that photo now, I can see something in my face that I couldn't see when it was taken. It's not unhappiness exactly. It's absence. Like the lights were on, but I'd been out for a while, wandering around somewhere in the back of my own house. Not quite present even in my own life. There's a moment here. I'm going to try to describe it properly. From about 8 months in, I was sitting outside the cafe on my street, early morning, before the heat really settled in, coffee in front of me. The neighborhood was waking up. A man was opening his shop across the lane, metal shutters rolling up with a sound I've come to find almost musical. 2 kids in school uniforms were eating something from a plastic bag, laughing about something, totally absorbed in whatever 7-year-olds laugh about. Mrs. Lan went past and said something I didn't catch but that sounded like a greeting, and I said good morning, and she laughed at my Vietnamese, and I laughed too. A motorbike went by playing something that might have been pop music from the tinny speaker attached to the handlebars. None of it was remarkable. None of it was a postcard. It was just a Tuesday morning in a neighborhood that was going about its life, and I was in it, present in it, not behind glass. I thought about Margaret then. I do that sometimes. She would have loved this, she would have hated this, she would have laughed at this. I think she would have liked the food. I think the heat would have made her grumpy for the first month, and then she'd have adapted faster than me, because she always did. I sat there missing her in a way that was, strangely, not painful, more like gratitude, grateful I had had her, grateful I had had that life, and ready, in a way I hadn't been before, for whatever this one was going to be. I called Kevin that evening. He'd been skeptical the longest, Kevin, the most worried. He's practical. Like me, grew up watching me work hard and be careful, and not take chances that didn't need to be taken. He had a lot of questions before I left, and most of them were good questions, and some of them were the kind of questions that are really statements in disguise. Statements that meant I don't want you to do this. I understood. I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing either, but that evening I called him and told him about the Tuesday morning at the cafe. Just the details, plainly, the way I've told you. The rolling shutters, the kids, the motorbike with the speaker, Mrs. Lan and my bad Vietnamese. He listened without interrupting, which is not his usual mode. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You sound like you again," he said. I didn't know what to say to that. I think I said something that wasn't very articulate. What I was thinking was, I didn't know I had stopped. I came here because the math stopped working, because $1,900 a month in Columbus had become a slow suffocation. Bills paid, nothing left, no room, no cushion, no margin for being human. I came here because Ray was sitting in the sun somewhere, and I was eating a cold sandwich in February and doing the same math I'd done 100 Sundays before and getting the same answer. But that's not what I found when I got here. Or, that's not all of it. The math is real, and the math is better, and I won't pretend otherwise. But what I actually found was space. Physical space. I have a terrace now, something I never had in Ohio, and I drink my coffee on it every morning. Financial space. The surplus, the emergency fund actually growing. The absence of the Sunday night math spiral. But mostly the other kind of space. The internal kind. The kind where you have enough quiet, and enough time, and enough present moment in front of you that you can finally hear yourself think. I'm 64 years old. I have, I hope, a lot of years left. I intend to spend them here, or somewhere like here, in places where life moves at a pace I can actually be present for. I'm not telling you this is the answer for everyone. It isn't. It requires real things from you. A willingness to be uncomfortable, to be confused, to be bad at things, to let go of control and punctuality and the particular security of knowing exactly how every system works. Some people have those things and still find that the trade-offs aren't right for them. I respect that. But if you're a regular person, not wealthy, not adventurous by nature, just someone who did the work and played it straight and found that it wasn't quite enough, and you're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday night doing the math again, I want you to know that there is more than one way to make the numbers work. I know, because I found it. Sitting on a terrace in Da Nang at 6 in the morning, with a coffee that cost 40 cents and a gecko on the wall who I've stopped being startled by, and the whole city just starting to come alive around me. Sometimes the biggest move you can make isn't a financial one. It's deciding that you still have time to become someone you recognize.